Green Trees, Michigan's Blog Talk Medical Marijuana radio show, bringing you every week the most up-to-date and important information for your learning and educational pleasure. Today, of course, is a very, very special episode. Officially, episode 153. We're calling it Cain versus Forrester. That's right. We're going to have a full-on debate with two advocates for the cannabis reform movement. And Jamie, what time will that be happening at?
Right around 8:30.
8:30 we're calling it for, and we've got a lot of excitement. This is a non-wagering event. Today, of course, is June 20th, 2013. The call number is 1-347-326-9626. I'm your host, Michael Komorn. Besides me, from the Birmingham Compassion Club, is Chad.
Good evening. It's nice to be here.
Also, our producer, Jamie Lowell from Third Coast Compassion Center.
Hello.
Again, I remind everyone, if there are any complaints, you're not upset about anything that's said, call Jamie. He's the producer and fielding all those calls. Also joining me in the studio is our dear friends, Dewey and Pam. Thanks for being here, guys. Is it working?
It's always a pleasure.
All right, we hear you. And as I mentioned, the tonight's show, we are calling it Cain versus Forrester. The topic and issue is, should taxing and regulating marijuana be part of the cannabis legalization or cannabis reform goal, or is there another plan? I think we're calling it tax and regulate or tomatoes.
Or both.
But whatever.
Tomatoes are taxed too.
Good point. It would be something not than tomatoes. Square enough will be, of course, longtime activist of head of the Cheboygan chapter, Michigan Norml Brad Forrester, who believes that tax and regulated approach is the most reasonable, and of course, fellow cannabis reform activist Bruce Cain, who firmly believes that cannabis legalization should exist without any taxing and/or regulating. We're going to have our call-in from Steve Green from the Human Solution and a spotlight on Michigan Cannabis Cancer Patient Organization with John Roberts. I am going to have a rant in a little while. We're going to have some news, current events, and much, much more. The contributors for tonight are, of course, Rick Thompson. We're hoping he's going to call in. He's not currently with us. Hopefully to report on the news. And Jamie Lowe, of course, Third Coast Compassion Center. Chad. Okay, tonight's show is sponsored by Komorn Law, 1-800-656-3557. The Michigan Medical Marijuana Association, MichiganMedicalMarijuana.org. I want to thank all the moderators who are participating in the making the environment there comfortable and allowing the discussion about medical cannabis to evolve. Shout out to our friend Kevin Spittler at the MedJoint Community Compassion Center in Ostemo, Michigan. And also, of course, the Marijuana Rancher, 313-422-5281. I'm going to do a little rant, and then I think, as we said, around the bottom of the hour here, we're going to have this debate.
Throwdown.
But it's going to be informative. That's how we want it to be. Anyways, my rant is going to be about the following. We've been talking about the MMA 101. We did part 1, part 2, and they kind of combined into maybe like a 1.5. But we were calling the first era the era of the Renaissance, where there was this newness, this rebirth, this conception of a legalization to a certain extent for medical cannabis, and interesting things developed. We talked about some of the memories that we had in terms of how the things were moving forward quite fast, and then all of a sudden it came to a standstill in regards to some of the arrests and the way that the courts had interpreted the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. And, I think one of the significant moments we were using as kind of a cutoff point was when those first dispensary raids took place in Oakland County, one of which I was involved in, and just the way in which it went down and the way in which the brutality that was involved. I think it did get a lot of terrible backlash in the press, even though it was interpreted a lot of different ways. But I think it was one of the points where you hear less and less of law enforcement going in with guns I think that's what I hear, and I hear the bad stories, but still nothing to that would ever suggest we've gotten to the point where it should be. But nonetheless, these raids took place, and the battles that took place in court were very, 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 very frustrating to say the least, because there was this. It was at a period. We were at a time when obstructionism was at its fullest. That there were rules that had been made by the Court of Appeals that were upholding the concepts or the rulings that lawyers could not mention the words medical marijuana in court. I mean, I say that, and today we know that this is not a thing, but just to think about how it was in that period of time and what had been gone through and the way in which the law was so, just so obstructed. And I refer to obstruction because, that case, as I think a lot of the existing failures of the Michigan Medical Marijuana Act. When I say existing failures, I mean the failed rulings of the court and the failed beliefs that the protections that would exist for patients and caregivers would come on the front end, or what we would call protections for Section 4. We say over and over again the Supreme Court had chances to employ those protections for a patient who was growing with another patient, but they said, no, that's an arrestable offense. You can defend yourself in Section 8. McQueen, another one where a patient acquires from a caregiver that they're not directly connected to. The patient is protected, but the caregiver is not, and they would have to assert a Section 8 defense, although one of the Supreme Court justices who wrote for the dissent would say that would be a protected transaction. But beyond that, I think much of the hoopla was provided by just an all-out assault by our leading law enforcement agent in our state, we've come to know, and I saw his responses most recently to the Jeff Irwin introduced Bill 4623, which reduced the penalties for those caught with 1 ounce or less of marijuana, and first-time offenders would face $25 or $50 fine for second offenders. And I read his retorts to the response to that, and just how silly it sounds in light of everything, and how it's just a continued obstructionist in the face of what is becoming an overwhelming majority of people that are supporting medical marijuana and marijuana reform, at least some methods of legalization across the country. And I want to, obviously we've discussed his obsession with medical marijuana. He's written 14 opinions in the years that he's been in the Attorney General's office. The first year he wrote 5, 4 of which were about medical marijuana. He spent a tremendous amount of time driving all over the state, preaching fear, discussing children as if that's a factor somehow, as it's not a factor and something that should be addressed with all the prescription pills and prescription deaths brought about by children getting into their medicine cabinets or easily acquiring it off the streets. Putting on seminars that were generally preaching what could only be described as propaganda that was not supported by real facts. And I say all that because, this past week I saw the Oregon Attorney General backing the legalization bill. I was reminded of Jerry Brown, the Attorney General in California, when the medical marijuana passed there, and how he wrote up a dissertation of some kind about how collectives could work together. But just the point was that you had a elected official that was independent of their political views, taking an honorable and reasonable step to try to facilitate the wishes of the voters. And, this law passed by overwhelming 63%. Never has there been any more votes cast in any election ever. And there's just this obstructionism that continues to exist. And but I guess the good news is this, and we say this every week, that despite the failed implementation, the protections that people should have from arrest and prosecution, we do have the Section 8 defense. And as oddly as it's been set up, I do believe that at the end of the day, every reasonable case should at least have an opportunity to get before a jury and let the jury decide whether they believe it's medical or not. I think that even though many of the attacks have been on what I criticize every week, are poor medical certifications in the sense of how they're going to be scrutinized in court, I still think that most people aren't going to care or scrutinize it the same way that a prosecutor does or a judge may in an adverse community. But I say all that because it is obvious that in the end, science and medicine will prevail. You can't fight that. As crazy as you want to be and as much as you want to spew the realities of what's going on, the medicine and the numbers are going to carry the day. I think, if not in the near future with Irwin's bill, at least we'll get some activity, and certainly shortly thereafter. So I think that those that get discouraged in all this and hear the traumas of what's happening and how offensive things have become and how difficult it is in the court system, I think it's really truly only a matter of time, but it's only going to be if we continue to fight back and defend and utilize the system the best that we can to make it known that the people of the state of Michigan are sick and tired of what's happening in terms of the outrageous failed policies of marijuana and especially medical marijuana, and it really is time to make changes. All right, so here's the Planet Green Trees. That's the rant. The call number is 1-347-326-9626, and we'll be right back.